Okay. Hi, I'm Stephanie Szostack, and I'm an actress.
There you go. No, I was going to ask, you're an author, you're an actress, you're a mom, you're a wife, you got all these, you're a golfer, all these
I
wonderful.
hear a lot of things, but I guess what's relevant in those spaces, my profession, I guess.
Yeah.
Otherwise, where's the end?
Is that what you tell people when, like, if you're on an elevator, what do you do? I'm an actress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
What are you working on right
definitely.
now? Do you have any big projects on
I
the horizon or coming up?
finished a movie at the end of last year that's called On Fire, which is John O'Leary's story. He wrote a memoir called On Fire.
Yeah.
He was burnt as a kid, as a
Right.
9-year-old kid, 100% of his body down. And he wrote a beautiful memoir, and they're making it into a movie. And I got to play his mom.
Oh,
So
fun.
yeah. So they're editing that, and it should be out at the end of the year, maybe next year. And
Cool.
then I'm auditioning, back to square one as an actor, kind of.
Nice. Yeah, I read a little bit about John in the intro to your book, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. I guess he wrote one of the introductions in your book as well. So,
He
well,
wrote
as
the
you
foreword.
the forward, yeah,
Yes.
there you go. Well, as you just
We're
heard, Stephanie Szostack, I'm going to just go a little bit off your bio here, is an actress. She's a Give an Hour ambassador. We'll talk about Give an Hour here in a little bit. I think that's a really intriguing cause and nonprofit I want to hear more about. Speaks on overcoming failure, being an outsider, and living with authenticity. Szostack left her native France to study business and play varsity golf, near and dear to my heart. Played a little bit of college golf myself, and you played at College of William and Mary. And then at 29 years old, Stephanie made that logical decision to go from corporate America into acting. So we'll talk about how that transition took place. You may have seen Stephanie in little known movies like The Devil Wears Prada, Iron Man 3, Dinner for Schmucks. And one of my favorite shows that I've been hooked on lately is the ABC series A Million Little Things. You talk about imposter syndrome a little bit. I'm gonna skip kind of the rest of your bio right here because we're going to talk about it all through this conversation. When I say
Mhm.
the word imposter syndrome, Stephanie, some people might be surprised and some people might not be surprised at all as an actress, especially someone who didn't get into it until 29. You weren't a child actor. Um, how does that imposter syndrome even affect you today in your career or in your life?
Well, maybe we'd start by saying what imposter syndrome is,
There you
because I
go.
think it's kind of a buzzword that people are throwing around a lot. I certainly didn't know what it was when I first heard it, and I was like, oh, wait a second, that's what I felt.
Yeah.
But it's described as the fear of being made out, uh, not being good enough. And for me, it happened ironically, when my career started, really picking up. And all of a sudden, I was on these big movie sets with big actors. Um, and I felt like I wasn't as good as they are. Like, basically, my inner dialogue on set, and I write this in the book, was after every take was, "Oh my gosh, that sucked. They're gonna think it
Yeah.
sucked. They're gonna think I suck. I do suck. I'm gonna get fired."
Hmm.
And it's funny, I was talking to my mother-in-law last week, and she asked me, she goes, "What is that imposter syndrome?" And so I described it, and she said, "Well," and I hope my father-in-law won't mind this, but he was in the Air Force, and at one point he taught at the Air Force, and she said John had that because he was surrounded by scholars. They were all, like,
Sure.
had big diplomas, and he was a pilot, but not a scholar. And
Hmm.
so she said that's exactly what we had. But a lot of, and what I've learned, I didn't know what it was when I was not suffering from it, but when it was impacting my performance, my relationships, my well-being. I mean, I was suffering from.
Sure.
What I eventually learned is that it's really common for all of us when we
Yeah.
do something that's out of our comfort zone, when we do something new. So I wrote a book, last year or two, maybe 2 years ago now, and I certainly had imposter syndrome again because I was like, "Who am I to write a book?
Hmm.
What are people going to think? What gives me the right to write a mental health well-being book?" All these things.
Yeah. Now, did the topic and that suffer experience what have you as well. I worked at a university for a lot of years. I'm not a PhD, but I was around a lot of PhDs.
That's
So
right.
it was easy to kind of feel like, of the picture of all of us on the website, which one doesn't belong? I'd always go right to
Hmm.
me, or, I was a general manager in minor league baseball, as you and I've talked about before, and I didn't work in baseball for 20 years to get to that level. I literally landed in this job, just, whether I was qualified or not. One day I was the GM of a baseball team. So that imposter syndrome, I have a podcast. What gives me the right to have a podcast? What gives me,
Hmm.
so yeah, that what gives me that fear of being found out, as you talk about. Did
But
your
what is
Yeah,
good? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut
no,
you
that's
off
all
there.
right.
I want to. I actually have learned to like my imposter syndrome because it's not
Interesting.
something to fight off. I think
Yeah.
whenever I feel, that doubt coming in, I'm like, okay, yeah, here's the little doubtful voice, and I actually have a reminder for myself in my playbook, which we'll
Mhm.
talk about later, but that says my imposter syndrome serves a purpose. It is my anchor into humility, curiosity, and creativity. And so to recognize that I'm doing something where I can learn, that I don't have it all figured out. And I, need to enjoy this process of discovery and creating and being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like that feeling of that fight, flight, or freeze mentality. The imposter syndrome can help us or can make us just freeze, like, what am I
Yeah.
doing here? Or we can just turn and run from what we're doing because we don't feel like we belong. Or to your point, we can use it to inspire us. Okay, maybe
Yes.
maybe there is that feeling of I don't belong. But you know what? A lot of the people that I work with, and I've had this conversation with a lot of close friends over the last several years, because I work with a lot of family business consultants, strategists, experts in various fields when it comes to business consulting. And a lot of us have that same feel. Well, who am I to get? I've never run a multi-million-dollar business. Who am I to give advice to these owners who run these $100 million or $100 billion companies? So that imposter syndrome can exist, I guess, everywhere. I've talked to athletes who have gone through it as well. You know,
Hmm.
I mean, you're in a career in acting where everybody wants your job. Everybody thinks they can do the job as well or better than you. Everybody talks about how they would do it differently. I go to a movie and I walk out of the movie theater saying, "Oh, I'd have written that part this way." And it's like, come on, if I was really that good at that, I'd be doing it. Right.
Yeah.
So I guess we use that imposter syndrome more as an inspiration or as a motivation to either belong or at least to succeed. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, and to recognize, great, I'm doing something I'm not comfortable with. That's a cause for celebration,
Yeah.
and you know, an indication that you're going to learn something, and
Yeah.
to be a little humble. And also, we bring a fresh perspective when we are not experts, when we, enter a world that we don't know. I think it's so easy when you are an expert to think, all your past experience leads you to think one way and you know what's coming next and what needs to be
Yeah.
done. When you have somebody who's an outsider that comes in, they bring in a fresh perspective, and sometimes that's enriching.
Yeah. Let's see that fresh set of eyes, as they say, right?
Hmm.
So you've worked with people like Meryl Streep and Paul Rudd and Steve Carell and Robert Downey Jr. and Ron Livingston and all these others throughout these movies and TV shows. What, other than the obvious, these are big stars and great people to work with, but what's the less obvious thing that's been so great about working with people like that or other actors that you've worked with, whether it's things you've learned or relationships you've developed or honed your craft? Are there things that stand out to you that you look at those individuals and just think, wow, not only I worked with Meryl Streep and Robert Downey Jr., et cetera, but just maybe things that you learned that you've applied into your life or your craft?
Well, what comes to mind as I'm hearing you ask this, the first thing that comes to mind is how different everybody's style is of not acting, not the craft, but of working.
Yeah.
There are actors who, and all these people are really, really good. But some of them, I've worked with actors who tape the the sides to the side of the camera or to a wall because they don't want to memorize it, but yet they're reading it,
Hmm.
but they make it seem so real. I'm like,
Yeah.
I would, if I did that, I would look like I'm
I'm
reading
reading.
lines.
Yeah.
Yes. Then there are actors who are word for word, memorized and prepared, but once they're on set, they completely make it seem completely natural and fresh.
Yeah.
Then there's actors like Robert Downey Jr. who
Hmm.
needs to rewrite everything on the day of
Hmm.
and keep it fresh and keep creating. And I had an acting teacher that said to me once, if you are right for the part, there's almost nothing you can do to not get it. And if you're not right for the part, there's almost nothing you can do to get it.
Get it.
And I think that, and he said to me, any great actor that you will see, they may transform in a lot of roles, but you'll always see their essence. And I think that's really true and can be applicable to the people who inspire us in life, like leaders. They all have a different style,
Yeah.
and you know what they're about. Their essence comes through, so
Yeah.
and that's what's inspiring, because I think that's what makes us connect to people, whether they're actors telling us a story or just somebody you're working with or talking to. When you feel that true essence, that authenticity, that's how we connect. And that's
Yeah.
when we have great conversation and enrich. Yeah, that's the magic.
I love that. I love what your acting coach said. If you're right for the part, there's nothing you can do to not get it. And if you're not, there's nothing you can do to get it. That's so great. I acted a tiny bit in high school and was in a couple of small plays and had I wouldn't say a vision of a career of it, but it was certainly something. I was George in Our Town in high school. And I've done a little bit
Oh,
of
that's a
acting.
great play. Yeah.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing that. And sometimes I wonder what if, I come from a family of musicians and drama and so forth, but never really made that my path. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there are times when it just felt so natural. And I see that in characters as well. In TV shows, movies, or what have you, and you probably do as well, being so close in it that, sometimes you forget. I've heard actors tell, and I've talked to actors on this show and others that have said that they will sometimes slip up and call the person by their character name offset, or flipping it, they'll call them by their real name on set. And I know that happens. I mean, you're acting with Ron, but he's really John, and so you slip and
Hmm.
so forth. But I would imagine that happens. That feeling when you're just kind of in a zone or in a groove, that must just be a really awesome feeling when you're making a movie or making a TV show. I know what it's like when I'm just in life, or I'm doing a training or a podcast. But can you talk about that, kind of being in that zone, or any experiences on that
Yeah,
where just
that is a real high.
yeah.
It's being, I guess, it's just almost in sync with not only with the other actor you're talking to, with the story, with and it's effortless, and you're just totally present and reacting to what's
Yeah.
happening. And you may, you know, I'm somebody who prepares a lot. Um, but once you're on set, when you are in that zone, all the preparation goes out the window, because you're
Right.
just there
Yeah.
with the other person dancing. And what you were
Mm.
saying about the great thing about TV is you end up really knowing the people. When you work on a show for a long time, you end up
Right.
knowing the people, and you create memories with these people of set. And sometimes you are acting in a scene, but memories from life come and infuse themselves, and um, it makes it's really beautiful. And also the crew is another aspect of
Mm.
that magic, because you're in the moment, you're truly present, and it's all, but at the same time your senses are heightened, so it's not like you're not aware of the crew, you forget them, you feel everything, and we're all like sort of rolling together, it's this,
Yeah.
and you feel the support of the crew, and it's beautiful.
Well, it's fun because we don't get to see them. We see
Is
just
now you
what the camera
don't.
shows us, and that's it. But yeah, I've talked to actors who are closer to the crew and the cameramen and the writers and the directors and producers than they are the actors. And I watch you on a million little things, and I think, oh, there's this 8 people and this ensemble cast, and they're so close. But you might be closer to the people at the craft table. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
so
you have a relation, there's so many departments, the makeup,
yeah.
the hair, and
Yeah. What do you love
wardrobe.
most about it? So you decided, I want to be an actor, and there's a long path and a journey that's gotten you to where you are today. And you're probably not where you still would like to be in some ways, but what do you love most about this career? And are you happy you chose it? Sounds like you obviously are, but I
Yes.
mean, what do you love about it?
I never said to myself, I'm going to be an actor. I took a theater class in New York City, like you said, at 29 years old. And I had a feeling after I did my first monologue, I had a feeling that was something that was when my monologue ended, I was in the zone, but it's you call it a breakthrough as an actor.
Mhm.
So there I forgot everything around me. I
Yeah.
wasn't in control at all. I just was in this space as a character. And when I finished, I felt so connected to who I was, to the core of who I am, to something inside that was, um, authentic and meaningful. And I just thought, I remember just thinking, I need to pursue this. I don't know at what level, but I just need to pursue this. And at the beginning, I think it was a little therapeutic. It was almost hiding behind a character allowed me to free, to be more free and to express who I was in a
Yeah.
fuller way.
Is there, if,
And so that's what I love the most is
yeah,
is acting, is being
yeah.
in there doing it.
And I think I read or heard you say somewhere that it was through this acting and this um, pretend pretending to be someone else that you actually figure out who you really are. I'm paraphrasing
Yes.
you, but that's I thought that was pretty profound. How do you
Yeah, it's
what do you mean by that?
ironic.
Yeah.
Well, I think I grew up, you know, I had an older brother who struggled with drugs
Yeah.
a lot. I had a very happy childhood and loving childhood, parents, but I don't know if you have addiction in your family or if you
We
have
do.
dealt with
I have a
addiction.
sister who's yeah, it's a long lifetime of it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, when you are in a household where there's addiction, there's a lot of uncertainty and ups and downs and
Yeah.
volatility, and you almost expect, the next bad thing to happen a lot. And so I think I took on an identity early on of being the good girl and doing the good
Hmm.
thing and um, making sure people were the peacemaker with people when there were
Yeah.
arguments. I was younger than my brother by 8 years, and I was just so I think being in that role, I sort of buried down a lot of who I was
Sure.
and didn't really know who I was. This was
Yeah.
my role, and I am a cheerful person. I truly believe that is who I am, but I think
Yeah.
this sort of cheerfulness took over at the price of not knowing what else there was. And so acting allowed me to explore the darker side and all the facets, the full spectrum. And
Yeah.
when we explore all of this, I think that's when we can really understand who we are and get to know ourselves and accept ourselves. And when we do that, we can accept others,
Yeah.
better. And yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about how you were the good girl, the good one, and then you mentioned in your book that because of the French background and just some of the roles that you've had, you're the adulteress. You're the, and like even in a million little things, you're not a bad person. You're a great person. You are that peacemaker. Your character,
Mhm.
you're the hub of this entire ensemble of everything happens at your house and everything's around you because you lost your husband. Not being a spoiler here if you haven't seen the show. It starts in
Well,
episode
she
one
loses him, yeah, in the
yeah,
first
she loses
episode.
her husband to suicide in the pilot. So, and
Mhm.
that's really what and it sounds like it's a very heavy theme, and it is. But I'm curious
Mhm.
how you talked in the book about how you really started interacting with the psychologist who was on set that helped with, a lot of the accuracy and the things that I'm sure came up during this show for 5 years is about mental health. One of the main characters is dealing with it. You lost your husband on the show to suicide. Mental health, obviously you can see it really permeating through every character on the show. And so to
Mhm.
have that expert on set, I'm sure was critical. Did your journey into mental health and mental illness and that theme start at that point with the show in your own personal life, or was that something? I know you said you lost a brother because of addiction, so I'm sure it happened before that. But and then your book is all about mental health. So take us through that journey of how it kind of led you from maybe your brother to the doctor on set for A Million Little Things to writing the book of that whole journey through mental health.
And so the psychologist, Dr. Barbara Treadwell,
Yeah.
she was the founder of the organization Given Hour. She wasn't on set. She worked with the writers as a
Okay.
consultant and the show creators, but she came to visit
Sure.
us on set. And so that's when I went to her and introduced myself. And I've always been fascinated about the mind, I think, and human nature and our behaviors. When I was younger, I wanted to be a social worker.
Hmm.
And I think that's probably because of my brother. I wanted to help
Yeah.
people like him. And I also had my dad was, and I say this in the book, he's one of my greatest teachers. And he could have been a psychologist. He had incredible perspective. To this day, he is, one of my first phone calls when I have challenges, when I don't know what to do with something.
Yeah.
He's very he has great wisdom in life and perspective. Um, and he also taught me how to play golf, and he
Hmm.
would repeat things like one shot at a time. The shot you hit is gone, and all
Yeah.
these things are helpful also in life.
Yeah.
Whatever the past is, the past is. If we dwell on it, it's not going to help us in the
Where do we
present. It
live? Do we
doesn't
live in
mean
the
we're,
past or the future, or do we live in the present?
yeah, it doesn't mean that we can't learn from the bad shot we hit on a
Mm-hmm.
hole, but when
Or
we're on the
celebrate the
course
good one.
playing,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
when we're on the course playing, we can't focus on that. We got to play the next shot. And then maybe later reflect on, okay, what do I need to work on my swing? So I think golf is a great analogy for
I do
life.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about
But
recovery. It's what do you do with that after you fail? What do you do next? And in golf, you're going to fail
yeah,
a lot if you play golf the way I do, especially.
yeah,
So
or the Olympics that are going on right now. I mean, I just saw the American and the gymnast, and
yeah,
the horse, is that what you call it? Just slip,
yeah,
and you're like, oh my gosh, he was doing so great, and boom, and
yeah. How many times they did it perfectly in practice, and then on the
yes,
stage with millions of people are watching, they slip up. Yeah.
yes. So, but
So your dad.
uh, yeah, but I I think up until I was probably 40 years old, my mindset about mental strength was power through. Um, that's how I was on the golf course. I
Yeah.
used bad self-talk, not bad, but degrading
Negative. Yeah.
self-talk, you piece of shit. Like, sorry if I'm swearing, but that's how I
All
talk to
right.
myself. You
Yeah.
loser, come on, come on. And that's how I dealt with things.
Hmm.
Anger was, even if it wasn't out, anger
You
inside
felt it
was
inside.
something,
Yeah.
yeah, that helped me to power through.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that that's not sustainable.
Hmm.
It resurfaced again for me when after 10 years, so at age 40, my career started
Mm-hmm.
picking up, and I'm on this set of Dinner for Schmucks with Paul Rudd and Steve Carell.
Yeah.
And my self-talk is what I said earlier. I got in the way of my performance. And I mean, I would say out loud sometimes in the middle of a take, fuck me, because I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get
Right.
it right. And I
Yeah.
was so
That's how
attached
I
to the
talk on the golf
outcome.
course a lot, by the way. Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
I've stopped doing that. I have stopped.
That a girl. Good.
But um it's the anger wasn't enough. It wasn't sustainable. And so I had to learn. What I discovered was that there are skills and practices and your perspective also on what success is, and I had such a need for validation. My whole self-value came from a lot from what other people thought, or what I thought they thought.
Right.
uh, or whether or not I was employed. So I really had to reassess my whole way of seeing the world and myself, and what's valuable, what's
Yeah.
important.
So you've had this journey that it's been on your mind. So in a lot of ways on the show, and I'm not going to dwell on this one show, but because I've been watching it, I'm in season 5 now, almost done. You're coming back.
Whoa.
I know yeah, I've been, it's just sitting on the phone watching when I'm laying in bed, or on this vacation that we were on last week, late at night watching, or, you know, little down moments and so forth. Now the Olympics are on, so I'm watching that mostly. But
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, the mental health theme kind of is woven throughout the entire, through a lot of the characters. Off that for a minute, but I'll come back in a second. If you were to take like a snapshot of any scene in your career acting to summarize, I guess, is there a scene or an episode or a segment of one of the movies you've done that you would think, wow, this is what I'm most proud of? I know it's hard to say, but I can look back in my career and think of moments that it's like, wow, that's what I would want people to see if they were to look at the From the Heart podcast, or see me as a GM in baseball, or see me in my role now. Anything come to mind as that one that is like, wow, that was when I was at my
Oh,
best?
oh gosh, no.
Huh. Oh,
You're
come on.
no. I mean,
Mhm.
but what comes to mind is not a moment I'm proud of, but it's a moment that moves me. And it's in a movie called We Bought a Zoo,
Mm.
with Matt Damon, which is
Love that
based on
movie.
a true story. And he
Yeah.
lost his wife. And there's a scene that I have zero words in the movie. I'm just flashback. And I auditioned actually for, this is a behind the scenes story. I
Mhm.
auditioned for Scarlett Johansson's role
Okay.
and
Cool.
had a call back with the director. And oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Why am I blanking on his name? He's amazing. He did Almost Famous. Um, oh my gosh. Okay. Anyway,
Mm.
Cameron Crowe. Ah,
Oh, Cameron Crowe.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, the legend, Cameron Crowe.
Yeah.
So I had a callback with Cameron Crowe and did really well in the callback. I was happy, and but I didn't get it. But my agent called and said Cameron would love for you, and he hopes you don't take this the wrong way, for you to play the role of the dead wife.
Nice. Love
And
it.
so, and I said, oh my gosh, no, I would, uh, and I had to meet with Matt Damon. He
Mm.
would like, would you consider this? And if you do, we would
Yeah.
have a meeting with Matt Damon. And I said, of course, because the script was absolutely beautiful. It's about grief and
Mhm. Great
just
movie.
grief, just,
That's a
yeah.
great movie. Mhm.
And there's a scene at the end of the movie where Matt Damon's character walks into the diner where he met his wife. And I think it's Little Dom's is
Mm.
where they shot it in LA.
Yeah.
And he sees her at the table where they met. And you know how you go back to places and you see the person you
Yeah.
love. And so he said it's back to flashback in his head of the moment
Yeah.
they met. But Matt Damon's character looks like in present time, and he says to this empty table, why, and then to his wife that he sees in and out, why would anyone like you or talk to somebody like me or something like that? And she looks up and she says, why not?
Mm.
And the movie ends. And
Oh, nice.
it is a really moving, that was a really moving scene, the way it was done, the way it was written in the script. It was a complete flashback, so Matt Damon would have been young,
Right.
and it was Matt Damon's idea. He said, I don't know, we're going to have anti-aging makeup, this always looks bad, da, da, da. And he said, what if you see me in present time walking in there and see the
Like
empty
that.
table? And it was such a brilliant
It actually
idea.
is so much more powerful that way, because he's got the experience and the wisdom of the years looking back at
Yes.
his childhood or youthful experience. I love that. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that movie now. So
Mm.
yeah, that's awesome.
And Cameron Crowe also, he had us, I think, rehearse for over a week with Matt Damon and the kids. There was no scenes that were in the movie, but just for us to establish the family and the role of the mom, and then the kids feeling the void
To
of the
build that
mom.
love.
Yeah, to build that relationship.
Yeah, I love that.
That that was a
Very
really
cool.
beautiful experience.
Oh, like I said, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that now. So let's get into the book a little bit. I mean, this book, here, I've got it back here for those that are watching on the video. Selfish, step into a journey of self-discovery to revive confidence, joy, and meaning. The idea behind the book and how it got to where it is, and how's the book doing? I mean, I'm curious. I mean, I have it. I'm using it now on a daily basis, and it's helping me quite a bit. So thank you for that. That with my 5-minute journal, which I've talked about before, that I have right
Yes,
here is
love
kind
the
of
5-minute
part
journal.
of my daily, the gratitude and so forth. And those two really kind of tie in hand, which is great. Talk about how the idea came about and just how's it doing, and what have you heard from people around the world that have been touched by it?
Well, the idea came because of my own experience. So, like I said, all of a sudden I had this imposter syndrome, and that led me on a journey for the past 10 plus years of personal growth and learning. And but one thing that was missing for me in this journey was, how do I remember all these things that I learned? I mean, I don't know if you're the same, but I read a book and I underline it and I make
Mm-hmm.
little stars. I might take a screenshot and put it in my phone, but then all these or I have folders on my desktop with
Little
the
sticky
things that,
notes that I put on every page and write a little note on the sticky when I'm reading something.
yes.
Yeah.
And actually, I did a movie. It was called R.I.P.D. And this was my first time, the first book I read that sort of led me into this journey. It was a book by Deepak Chopra called The Seven Spiritual Laws of Success.
Okay.
And it resonated so much with me that I went to the bookstore and got a set of flashcards and put the takeaways on flashcards. And every day before I went on set, I would look at one flashcard. And so it sets sort of my intentions for the day. And, oh, today I'm going to focus on giving, on being and giving and receiving and seeing all the gifts around. And that was my intention. It completely changed the way I felt on set, because whenever the negativity would come in, I had something to fall back on.
Yeah.
But when I finished the movie, the book went on the bookshelf with the flashcards inside, and
Yeah. Never to be seen
out of
again. Yeah.
never out of my memory.
Yeah.
But I kept working and kept learning things and kept forgetting these things. And so actually this was my husband's idea. One morning I came down the stairs and he said, "Why don't we have a playbook? A playbook with all the things that help us. And every day it would be on our phone. We could hit play and they would all come to life, all the reminders with music.
Hmm.
And every day we could start our day by looking at all these things from different sources, different books, or even just your own life lessons, your own goals. It would be all together." And so I created a playbook and I did it for my husband. And this was 6 years ago, and it completely changed the way I felt on set. But then I start most days with it at home,
Yeah.
looking at my playbook. I have a playbook for the golf course where I have
Hmm.
my golf skills and some of the
Nice.
great, you know, great shots that brings
Yeah.
joy to me. So that's the inspiration. And I never meant to share this tool with anyone except my friends and
Hmm.
family. But during COVID, Give an Hour, Dr. Barbara Van Dalen left Give an Hour, and they had a new CEO called Trina Clayer, and her team called me to introduce themselves, and they asked, "What do you do for your well-being? We're in a time where everybody's stuck at home. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. We're trying to think of how can we, help our community during this time."
Yeah.
And so I said, one thing that's unique is this playbook concept. And so we created a webinar series together, 4-part webinar series for their community, with other Give an Hour ambassadors who really love this concept. And the response was amazing, but people kept asking, "What do you put in your playbook?"
Yeah.
And I would say
Like, well,
it's
that's my
personal.
playbook. You have yours.
Yeah, it's personal. We all have different things that help
Right.
us, different things that resonate with us, and different goals, different values, which wasn't really helpful to say that. But
Hmm.
somebody reached out and said, "Have you ever thought of writing a workbook that would help people create the foundation of their playbook?" And so I went back to Give an Hour and I said, "Somebody suggested this. Would you like to do this together? If we can help just one person, it will be worth it." And
Mm-hmm.
so we did it.
Yeah.
And it's 50% of my proceeds go to Give an Hour. And it turns out that it's helped quite a few people.
Yep.
I've gotten amazing feedback. Um, it's helped to people, individual people who buy it. But one of the most amazing experience has been book clubs. Given Hour did a book club,
Nice.
and I participated in it. And one of the members of that book club then started her own book club in St. Louis.
Hmm.
And she just sent me a little movie with all the people in her book club,
Oh, fun.
saying what they loved about the book. And the book I think it's in its third printing. So, it was never meant to be a big book. It's a tiny book, but it keeps
Yeah.
going, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, you should be. I'm proud that I know you and that you did this, and that's part of my daily routine now as well. I love it. Can I I'm gonna take a risk here and hope that you're gonna say okay to this. On page 10 in the book, you talk about the self-reflection, the 8 steps.
Hmm.
And as I was reading through this the other night and thinking about our conversation here today, I thought, how fun would it be to go through these 8 steps with you? Sort of to tease it for those that don't know anything about the book, but also I'd love to hear anything that you'd like to share on any of these 8 steps. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, of
All
course.
right. So the first one is, what are your greatest achievements? So think of, maybe, do you want to take this golf, acting? You want to, so basically you segmentalize this into a certain area, right? So
Yes. Well, I think the workbook is really for your life, and
yeah.
then you could do this, and everybody's different, but
Sure.
and all these steps, I made up 2 of them
Okay.
only. Uh, One is, how do you find and spread joy, and the
Yeah.
other one is, what are your pearls of wisdom, which is to
Yeah.
encourage people to really, go back to those books and to the things that help them. But the others are all versions of the exercises that have really helped me.
Yeah.
I went back to my playbook and I was like, what's in there, and how can I help people create their playbook? So the first one, yes, is, what are your greatest achievements? And the exercise is not just about finding your wins in your own life, but it's also looking at the challenges you've had, the moments where you really struggled, where you weren't sure how you were going to make it through, and then somehow you found a way. This was a really powerful exercise for me, because some of the things that I would have looked at as failures, I went back and I discovered, wow, actually, this is one of my greatest achievements. So, an example
Yeah.
would be my freshman year in college, when I came to America and to play golf and study business. I had actually a really hard time with culture shock,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt very lonely, isolated. It was also the year that my brother was diagnosed with hepatitis C and cirrhosis and was HIV positive, and
Wow.
this was 1990. There was a lot of stigma around HIV and AIDS, so I didn't really want to share that news with anyone.
Sure.
And I actually ended up going back home my sophomore year. It was a miracle that I stayed the full year, because I wanted to quit and go home. But my dad came to the rescue, and
Yep. We
with
both have very
wisdom, and
good dads. You have, yeah, my dad, you described
got
your
me
dad a
this.
lot of the ways I describe mine.
Yeah, he helped me like make my way through the first semester, which was really the hardest. And then I ended up coming back junior and senior and graduating from William and Mary. But I would have looked at my freshman year like, yeah, that was not a great, not a
Nice
success for
experiment,
sure.
didn't work. Now I'm back.
Didn't
Yeah.
work. Yeah, failure, a hard time. But
Yeah.
looking back, I realized, oh my gosh, this experience is one of my greatest achievements. I stayed the whole year,
Mm-hmm.
and then I did listen to myself, which is also important. I went back home. I didn't drop out. I went home, um, because I needed to. I wanted to be close to my brother. When I went home, I actually met my husband,
Hmm.
uh,
Yep.
in France, who's American in France, and
Wow.
and then I went back and I learned a lot, and to this day, whenever I have imposter syndrome, now I think back of that freshman year. I didn't have imposter syndrome, but I felt like an outsider. I felt like I didn't belong, and so it
Yeah.
reminds me, oh, this is something that I felt again and again in my life, and it's okay. And
Yeah.
now, instead of being afraid of it or trying to push it back, um, it's just like, oh, this is this thing that happens to me,
Yeah.
and now I have the confidence that I can make it through. So the exercise is really valuable because it guides you little by little with pertinent questions to go look back through your life, find moments, wins, successes, but also challenges you've gone through, and then ask what helped you make it through, so you can identify some of your strengths, your character strength, the people that helped you along the way. Look at these people as, your support system. So there's a lot of awareness that can come from this exercise.
Yeah, and a lot of what I'm hearing you say, and I feel this way as well, 100%, is oftentimes when we look back at things in our life that at the time felt like a failure, that really was the greatest achievement. The fact that we got through it, the fact that we learned from it. I think I've shared with you before, Phil Jackson, the old basketball coach of the Lakers and the Bulls. Years ago, the Bulls went 72-10, and he was asked, what was your favorite time during the year? And he goes, the day after the 10 losses, because that's when we were most teachable. That's when the guys would come to the gym ready to learn, because what we did last night didn't work. And we learned more in those 10 practices after the 10 losses than we did in the other 6 months of the season. So oftentimes, your freshman year of college, at the time you're in, it's like, get me out of this. But now looking back, it's like everything good happened because of what happened that year.
Well, the struggles push you to learn because you're suffering, and
when things are easy. We're not really looking for the learning.
Anything.
Yeah, we're not looking for what the wisdom is in this. Let's just enjoy the ride.
Or the change. When we're suffering, we need change. Yeah.
So number 2, and without going through all 8, I like where I think you're going to go with this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Who do you admire? How is that as part of this process?
So I was given this exercise by a coach, and it said, who do you admire? Make a list, 5 people, 7 people, whatever. Don't think too much. Did my list. The people can be people they can be famous people, they can be your favorite characters from movies. So I had my dad, my mom, my brother. I had a character from The Way We Were, my favorite movie, Barbara Streisand in that movie. Bob Marley, Mick Jagger.
Nice.
And you don't need to admire the whole person. It's just people who inspire you. Yeah. And then it was write down 3 qualities. Like, what is it about this person that you admire? What do you look up to? So write those things down. And what's interesting afterwards, but I don't want to say it because then we're spoiling the exercise.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, we don't need to, we can you just tease it. You know how that works.
So the great thing about this exercise is really allows you to discover about yourself things that I wasn't necessarily aware of. That are important to me. It's tied into the values that are important to you. Whenever people were like, I've heard a lot, you need to know your values. Your values are important. And it was always given to me as an intellectual exercise. This allows you to get to your values in a very different way, that more from the heart.
Well, and also, I like that pun. Thank you for throwing in that little from the heart.
That's right.
My podcast. I appreciate that. My last name and the name of the show.
From the heart.
Very good, Stephanie. Thank you so much. I should end there and just say, there's my snapshot.
It was a happy accident.
There you go. Happy accidents. Those are the best ones. I mean, I look at people when I taught my sports leadership classes over the years. I would ask my students from all over the world. I think I've told you I had students from Paris and Germany and all over the world. The first night, I would ask them to identify who are the 5 people you admire most in your life. And once you've identified the list, okay, now go through and spend the next half hour for each one. Why? And then go through the next step after that is, okay, now that you've identified who you admire. So with you, I admire my dad. Okay, why do I admire my dad? Well, he taught me this, he taught me that. Okay, why is that so important to you? And then you talk about why that's important to you. And then the next step is, how are you striving to implement those characteristics and what you've learned from him in your life, so that maybe someday, not that it's because you want somebody to say Stephanie's my favorite person and here's why, but there are characteristics in the people we admire that we want to implement into our own lives. So it sounds like that's similar to this process as well. If I can be more like the people I admire, I'm living a good life.
Yeah, and there's actual science. Each exercise has science behind it that, I worked with Given Hour to put there, but there's actual science that says that knowing the people we admire and knowing why we admire them, they call them value guides, is enough to actually help us embody those characteristics in our lives.
Yeah.
And there's I think there's a psychologist quoted in here that says, in other words, thinking of your grandmother and knowing why you love your grandmother is enough to make you, be more loving, or whatever the characteristics are that your grandmother,
Yeah.
that you admire about your grandmother. And I've, I mean, it works. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. One of my
Yeah.
person is Mick Jagger,
Wow.
because I think the reason is because I heard him on Larry King, an interview, and Larry King asked him, what do you think of before you get on stage? Do you think I'm going to give my audience, the crowd, like the best show they've ever seen? And he said, no, I just think, F it. Just go out there, fuck it, just go
Yeah.
out there. And
Just
I
have
was
fun.
like,
Get out
oh,
there.
but
Yeah.
the way I admired in that moment, because he was so genuine, so honest, also not a movie star at all in that interview, no, not a rock and roll star at
Yeah.
all. And so I have Mick Jagger in my playbook, and before I go on set, kind of it
F it.
it gives me that little edge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just looking at him, I don't need to think, oh, do this, do that. It just brings it on, just thinking about him.
I love it. You talked earlier about how it might be a real person or it might be a fictional character or a character in one of your shows. When I watched A Million Little Things, there's something about Gary, that character, that I really relate to. I mean, just he's a people pleaser. He wants people to love him. He wants to be able to help people. He wants to fix things, and that can come back and bite you in the butt. And it has with me over the years at times. Sometimes it's been great, but yeah, for those who have watched the show, that character, there's something I probably relate more to him, although I relate to all the guys because they're all sports fans, and so am I. And but I relate to your character as well. I relate to that, the mother, the kind of the central point. People gather at our home like they did at your home as Delilah on the show and so forth. So it must be fun to kind of look at characters from your shows or your movies and take little slivers of the personalities or characteristics of those fictional characters and implement them. I think that's why we relate to shows, movies and TV shows more than others, because we relate to the characters.
Yes, and we feel seen and connecting. I mean, that Gary's character is, when I read the pilot, uh, is one of the reasons why I absolutely love the writing. DJ Nash created the
Yeah.
show, and he had a line in the most tragic moment. Their friend dies by suicide, and he says, how do we know he didn't jump or he didn't fall or something? Like it was humor in the worst moments.
Yeah.
And
Which is
that
what he does in
reminded
that show.
me,
Yeah.
yes, but it's real. It's not disrespectful. It's
Mhm.
what we do and what helps. My dad, we had a dinner one night, and my mom, my dad, my brother, and we were sitting like this and talking, and my dad mixed up our names, as parents, how we do that. Stephanie, Claude,
Yeah,
oh gosh, we ought to give you guys numbers, he
exactly.
said. And then he goes, and we'll give Mark Magic Johnson's number, because Magic Johnson was just,
Diagnosed
you
with
know,
HIV.
with
Ooh.
HIV.
Yeah. It's like your
And
dad, but at the same time, they
and we
say what
all
we're
laugh.
thinking. Right.
We all laugh. And so I reading the pilot, it made me, I was like, yes, this is something I want to be a part of, because if somebody
Yeah,
it takes courage to write humor like that,
it does.
and
Yeah.
but
Yeah. So well
thank
done.
goodness for people who have that humor in our lives.
Yeah. Just so the character development in that show. I mean, I could sit here, we could do another hour just on that show. It's so good. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
so relatable. Every character, there's, your kids on the show, everybody. It's just, yeah, fun show. It's a big plug for A Million Little Things. If you haven't watched it, watch it. I'm watching it on Netflix right now. I'm almost done. You're gonna love it. All right, I'm not gonna hit all 8, but there's a couple more here that jumped out at me. This is where I want to kind of take the last few minutes of this conversation and then ask you a few questions after this. What is your impossible future?
So this exercise is about using your imagination to imagine your greatest future 5 to 10 years from now. And there are no obstacles in this future. Anything is possible. Money, logistics, geography, everything's possible. And you can look at, your professional life, your personal life, your relationships, your children. It's absolutely wonderful. And a therapist gave me and my husband this exercise years ago. Um, and he said, you just close your eyes and you imagine this future. And if you imagine something you don't love, you're like, no, I can change that and
Yeah.
just change it.
Yeah.
And pay attention to how you feel and then open your eyes and write it all down. It's really telling about what might be important. I mean, I remember when I did it, one of the things that came to mind at first was I want to win an Oscar. And then I was like, why do I want an? Well, because then I was like, no, that's not true. An Oscar doesn't mean I'll do really, valuable work. I will that. So what do I really want to do? And so
Hmm.
it helped me become more
Yeah.
clear about what it is that's important in my career. I realized, no, the Oscar was more about validation, about,
Sure.
you know,
And it is, and and you wouldn't say no to it. They call you up on
I wouldn't
stage, you're
say
going to
no
take
to it,
it.
but that was not what I was
Right.
after. It allowed me
Yeah.
to be clear about what am I after really.
Yeah.
And it's like that for all of the aspects of your life, spiritual, relationships, personal.
Mhm.
Uh, and the science behind it is that this isn't woo woo or magic. It's just when we are clear about what we want for ourselves, we are more apt to act in our life in the direction that will lead us to there. And there's a funny story in there that, where it shows that whatever I wrote in my impossible future turned out to be I had a dog in my impossible future. And at the time, I was not a dog person. And I
Oh,
was like,
cool.
what? There's dog hair on the carpet? What the
Huh.
heck?
How did that happen?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now I have Otis.
Now you have
And
a
I
dog.
live in a house that looks exactly like the house I described in that impossible future.
When I was in high school, I was 18, and I'll rush through this really fast. I had a English composition teacher, Mrs. Selway. She was everybody's favorite. She was beautiful. She was fun. She was charismatic. She'd hug us when we came into class back in the 80s when you could hug students,
Yeah.
and just every day we looked forward to whatever fourth period advanced comp, whatever it was. And then this one day we got there and she wasn't at the door waiting to greet us. She was just sitting behind her desk. She had this melancholy look on her face. We all sat down at our little tables. We were in little pods looking at each other. And
Mm.
all of a sudden we look up on the then chalkboard, now would be a whiteboard, chalkboard above her, and says, "My life at age 40." And so it hit us. Oh, that's right. It's Mrs. Selway's 40th birthday today. We knew it was coming, but we just kind of forgot until we got there. And so at first we thought she's just like mad at the world because she's 40. But then we realized this as we started talking and she started sharing the assignment with us that our assignment for the rest of the semester was going to be to write an essay, not just like a one pager that you're going to do in class, but this is going to be like a month-long project. What's your life? Almost kind of a vision board, if you will. What's your life going
Mm-hmm.
to look like? Your impossible future, to use your terms from the book. What my life would look like at age 40. And I wrote that I'd be married to my high school sweetheart. Well, at that point, I didn't have and this was April of 1982, 2 months before I graduated from high school. So I didn't have a high school sweetheart. A month later, I met a girl and she and I are now celebrating, just hit 31 years and all these kids and grandkids. I was going to be at age 40, I was going to be the general manager of a professional baseball team. 3 months before my 40th birthday, I got the job as a general manager of a baseball team. I described my dream house. When I was 40, I lived in that house. I described the dream car, which, 82, the cars were different than they were 40, at age
Mm-hmm.
40. But point being that I sort of did that exercise without realizing that's what I was doing,
Yeah.
describing that impossible future of the white picket fence and the two-story house and the nice sports car and the great job and the great wife and the great kids. And so, yeah, there's a lot to be said for putting that in writing and creating that. And the Oscar, if I can play amateur psychiatrist here for a minute, it's not the trophy. It's not even the recognition up on stage. It's what it says about what you've accomplished in your career. I mean, you have goals in your career that you still are striving to reach. That's why you continue to act. So the trophy
Yes.
doesn't mean that you've suddenly reached that pinnacle of your career. It just means that, you know what, it might help with the imposter syndrome a little bit. Hey, others are recognizing that I'm pretty damn good at this. At least I was once, so it's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
but if I'm 100% honest, like in the last day of my life, what do I want? I want to say I worked with directors that I really love. I've worked on meaningful
Yeah,
projects. Like these things that's really what it's about. And maybe out of these things there would be an Oscar, and that would be
sure.
amazing. But that's not my
Yeah. Doesn't
what
change your life.
fills me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you are making an impact. I mean, one of the reasons for those who know to find out how I reached out to Stephanie, I heard about this website called brandbuilders.com, went on it, started, punching around on it, saw you. I dug deep into a lot of the people who I saw on that site, but your bio on there was so appealing and so like, hey, you want to get to know me, reach out. And so, all right, I'm going to put this to the test. And I did, and you did. And so, and here we are, 2-3 months later, we're having our second or third conversation. And, maybe I'm a little bit presumptuous to consider you a friend, but I do. I mean, we spent this time together and, you're making an impact on my life. You're making an impact on a lot of people's lives. And hopefully this interview today will make an impact on others as well. So thank you. I'm not wrapping up and done, but we are going to wrap here in a minute because we are at our hour. But you are reaching that big, impossible goal of making an impact, which I think is what you really want to be doing.
Yeah, I don't think I think that's something I realized later. I think first it was really me, my career getting better, my family. Um, and then as you get a little bit older, you realize, oh, no, there's it's bigger than that. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than my little world. And if we can touch people, oh my gosh. And it started that feeling, a million little things. I've never had a project where people come to you because it is a show really about life, real life, and we
Yeah.
cover every issue under the moon.
Yep.
I've never had people come to me, and we've all had that experience where they say how much the show has touched their lives. So
What are you
yeah,
most proud
greatest
of?
gift.
What are you most proud of with that show?
Just I'm most proud. What am I most proud is a weird
Proud's a
word
weird
for
word.
me.
Yeah, it is. It's almost, we're taught that it's a negative word because it's kind of like, so much pride. But what do you look
Well,
back?
maybe I don't know. Maybe it's telling. Like I'm not like, ooh. Maybe it's telling of my.
Mm,
Maybe I should be more. I don't know.
I'm sure
But
you are.
yeah, I'm amazed. Amazed. The biggest gift is the audience response and the friendships that I've gained through the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun. I had, as you and I talked about before we hit record, you were kind enough to introduce me to your son. And in the first conversation Max and I had, I talked a little bit. I asked him a little bit just in passing, what's it like to have a mom who's on in the movies and TV shows, and just like in your character on the show that you're gone and you're in Paris. And he said that people walked up to him on the streets or at school, what was that like that time when your mom was gone for like a year in Paris? It's like, dude, that was a TV show, So a lot of people like look at you and think of they look
Yeah,
at you and
my
think
mom was
Delilah
actually
rather than,
home. Thank
yeah,
goodness.
yeah, I was actually
That's
home.
why that's why her character was in Paris. It's because it was COVID
Yeah,
and she needed to be home with us.
right. You had to be home with, she was actually home with us rather than not. She
Yeah,
wasn't gone. That was the character.
yeah.
So I love that. I love that so much. I've enjoyed this time with you. How do people find your book?
Uh, on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or online bookstores, you can order it. Selfish.
What's the best way to reach you if anybody, I mean, I found you through Brand Builders and I know you're out on social media, but how would people contact you if they want to learn more about the work you're doing or your career or just you as a person?
My website, stephanieszostack.me. It's probably the best way.
Awesome. So what's that big, not that impossible future, but if there's that one big goal, Oscar aside, I know that's not really the goal. What drives you, I guess I'd say, that you hope to accomplish in your career and your life that's kind of out there that's keeping you driven and focused moving forward?
Well, I've never had really long-term goals. I've never been like my 5-year goal, my
Yeah,
really just to keep on exploring. Right now, I'm working on the app for that will allow you to have your playbook.
I was going to ask about that.
And it's in beta stages. It's actually available. If you want to, you can go to selfishplaybook.com and
Okay.
request the beta app. I use it every day. It's amazing. I mean, one of the dream, yes,
Hmm.
would be that everybody, turns on their phone when you buy a new phone and you have your photos, your music app,
Mhm.
and then you have your playbook, which is the
Cool.
place where you put everything that elevates. your mindset, because that would mean, and I don't care if it's called selfish or something else,
Right.
but just that would mean that people are really, everybody knows that how important it is to every day remind ourselves of what helps us better respond to life, what our values are, what our goals are. We're different every day that we
Mhm.
wake up. And I look at my playbook every day, and every day something different jumps at me,
Yeah.
because it's like a mosaic of all the things that helps you um, think better, feel better, and do better.
Yeah, I want that too. I started searching when I started reading the book a few weeks ago. I started searching for the app, and I know it's in beta. So I'm looking for, I will go onto the website when we're done here, and I'll put that in the notes for this show as well. If people want to access you or the book or the app through the website, I am looking forward to that, because I do the 5-minute journal in the book, and I also do it on my phone. And I'd like to be able to just kind of put those together, have it, with
Yeah.
me everywhere I go, because I don't carry the book with me everywhere I go, but I carry my phone everywhere. So
Yes.
I
I'd
heard
love
you.
to hear your feedback, what you think of
Yeah,
it.
well, yeah, absolutely. And so far, the feedback on the book, I love it. Feedback on the book. I heard you interviewed by Brian Baumgartner, the guy who played Kevin Malone on The Office, on his podcast recently. We listened to that, my wife and I, on the drive up to Utah a couple weeks ago, and that was tons of fun. And you guys talked about golf a little bit. You have 3 holes in one. You mentioned on the top of that show.
Yes.
So tell me about those holes in one.
One first one was playing by myself with 3 balls, but practicing for big tournament in France. But there was the guys on the green working the greens and the
By
green
myself.
on
Yeah,
the,
you had witnesses.
yeah.
There you go. Is what I hear.
So
Yeah.
I had a witness. That was my
Yeah.
first one. My second one was really fun. It was playing with my dad.
Mm.
And maybe that actually, maybe that was my first one. I was young and I had a temper, like I said, and I had a horrible, I think I had an 8 on a par 5. I think I picked up my ball and I didn't finish the hole. And we were playing, we got paired up with a third player. We were playing
Yeah.
in Virginia somewhere. And my dad took me aside and he said, "You do not pick up your ball and get your, like
Stuff
your
together.
attitude. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
enough with the attitude and let's get back into things." And I was like, fine, okay. And I
Mm.
got on the tee box. It was a par 3, the next hole, and
Yeah.
boom, hole.
That's so awesome. I love that. I love
And
that.
the third one was with my husband when the first year we were together was in France. We were playing golf and he was beating me. He's better than me now, but at the time I was better than him. And
Mm.
he was beating me, you know, through 12 holes, and 13 is a par 3, and I had a hole in one.
I
And
love it.
he was like, "What? Come on."
I've been playing for 48. I started at age 12. I'm 60. I've never had one. Every time I ever
Yeah.
stand on the tee at a par 3, I think hole in one. That's probably why, because I'm always thinking about it. And it's not going to happen. It'll
You
happen on
want
the
it
day that
too much.
I've come close. I've had a divot in the cup. I've had it back up and lean on the hole, but I've never sealed the deal. So maybe someday. So
Well, my dad, who was a scratch golfer most of his life,
mm,
was never had one either.
my
So
dad didn't either. My dad played golf up almost until his last days at age 94, and he never had one. So like he
amazing.
played his whole life. So, well, Stephanie, this has been a joy for me. It's been fun. The conversation we had previous to this, the interaction we've had since, and especially this hour we've had here today. I guess I'll
Thank
just
you
ask
so
you,
much.
I have one last question to ask you that I think you know is coming. But before I do that, is there anything I've missed? Anything that you were hoping that we would uncover or talk about today? Because I don't want to leave that undone.
No, had no expectations. I was
Okay,
just
good.
like, let's
Yeah.
see where we go.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it was really,
I hope
thanks
this is
for doing this.
hope it's a preview of another conversation we have as well. This has been just a joy. So let me ask you my last question. The podcast is called From the Heart. So I ask this question of every guest that I've had without saying, I say their name, not yours, but Stephanie Szostack, what's in your heart?
Love.
Mm, that's clear. So.
Yeah. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, love.